Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is episode 121. We're back after a brief break from podcast episodes. Gave me some time to gather up some content, to get some good interviews going. And we also just released a product, Thoracic Outlet Syndrome Diagnoses and Intervention, that I'm really excited about. It's a 2-hour course that was a collaborative effort with the Fascia Training Academy. And in it, we take an unprecedented deep dive into understanding, identifying, and treating thoracic outlet syndrome. Features anatomical animations, guided cadaver dissections, practical exercises, and powerful case studies. So I think it's a really cool option for rehabilitation specialists, fitness professionals, strength and conditioning coaches that gives them essential knowledge surrounding this, potentially debilitating condition that we see really commonly in overhead throwing athletes. Before we get to today's episode, I definitely encourage you to take a look at that. It's ericcressey.com/thoracic outlet. Something that I think will intrigue you. And this is actually a very timely guest. It's a great guy who I've been fortunate to work with for about 8 years now. One of the really, really good dudes in Major League Baseball, but it's particularly timely because he's an athlete who had thoracic outlet surgery, and he shares his story just a little bit, kind of an additional case study that matches up with the one that we have in the product. And I think it really helps you to wrap your head around just how significant and this condition is, and also how challenging a diagnosis of exclusion it can be. So this is a really good episode, one of my favorites that we've done. So hopefully you enjoy it. Today's episode is brought to you by Anchor Training. And if you haven't heard of Anchor, you need to, because this is an equipment innovation that's disrupting the fitness, strength and conditioning, and rehabilitation industries in the best possible way. Anchor is an attachment that rigs up easily to power racks, support beams, and can even be wall mounted. Once it's set up, you can do chops, lifts, rotational patterns, presses, rows, and a variety of arm care exercises. Basically, if you can do it on a functional trainer or conventional cable setup, you can do it on Anchor, but at a dramatically lower price point and with much less space taken up. For these reasons, it's a perfect addition to many baseball facilities and home gyms that may have limited space and budget. And we have multiple units at both Cressey Sports Performance facilities and use them frequently every day. Additionally, over the lifespan of the product, the maintenance costs are really low. At CSP, we currently pay over $300 a year for each one of our functional trainers in terms of parts and labor to replace the cables on the functional trainers at our facility. Swapping out an Anchor cable costs about 1/6 that amount and is as simple as shipping it back to the company who sends out a replacement. Perhaps most importantly, Anchor travels extremely light. You can throw it in a backpack or a suitcase and not even know it's there. I know of coaches and players in the baseball industry that are taking these units on the road to overcome under-equipped minor league weight rooms and hotel gyms. So when all is said and done, it saves space, money, and headaches while also offering the benefits of portability. To learn more, head to www.anchortraining.com and enter coupon code Cressey at checkout to save 10% on your purchase. Again, that's anchortraining.com, ANCORETRAINING.com, and the coupon code is Cressey, CRESSEY, to get 10% off on this great product. Being quite honest, I wish I had thought of this myself because it's a genius innovation that has really made a remarkable difference in our training programs, and the convenience and the affordability are really outstanding. So can't recommend this highly enough. Definitely check it out, especially at this great discount. Today's guest is a right-handed pitcher who grew up in Texas and played baseball at the University of Oklahoma, Navarro College, and Vanderbilt University over his 3-year college career. In 2012 for Vanderbilt, he made 27 appearances, including 7 starts, and went 6-3 with a 3.50 ERA in 69 1/3 innings. Following that season, he was drafted in the 4th round by the Detroit Tigers. He made his major league debut for the Tigers July 19, 2014, and following that season, he converted to relieving, which he did for the Tigers through 2019 with a few starts mixed in. He spent the 2020 and 21 seasons in Japan as a starter, making 38 starts for 211 innings, with 215 strikeouts against 62 walks. Prior to the 2022 season, he signed a 2-year major league deal with the St. Louis Cardinals. Please welcome to the show, VerHagen. All right, Drew, thank you so much for joining. I am actually really excited to talk to you because we can cover a lot of different areas of sports medicine and baseball performance and all that fun stuff. So welcome.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, man.
No worries. So I have known you since probably 2014. You started working with us. And even before that, I kind of knew you from afar from your timeline at Vanderbilt and all that. But I think it's good to maybe start with your high school path. It was certainly unique because you were a Tommy John guy as a senior in high school. talk to me about kind of like what high school baseball looked like for you and how, going through that surgery at that timeline impacted the recruiting process for you.
Yeah, so I hit a big growth spurt going into junior year of high school. So it was between sophomore and junior year, and when I hit that growth spurt, I went from throwing like 83, 84 to popping like 93s, just I don't, a big jump. And as soon as I made that jump, I started throwing, pitching well, and getting some recognition. And I think I had, interest from the top schools in my that I was in, like, that I really loved was Texas and LSU, and both of them came through and offered when I had that jump in velo. And then junior year, I end up tearing my UCL, and the date where colleges can call you, I think it's like July 1st or something, that came after my junior year, was just me basically telling all the schools that I was hurt. And at that point, every single one of them dropped their scholarships. And then, so I didn't pitch my senior year, but luckily Oklahoma came through, and they called me actually when I was in a sling from TJ and said, "Hey, we heard Texas dropped your offer. Do you want to come be a Sooner?" And that I committed instantly. So that was kind of the route.
So I'm always like kind of curious. It sounds like your velo kind of came overnight. Was it one of those situations where like, to some degree, it's like an arm that's writing checks the butt can't cash? Like it's just you got to bring a Ferrari and you don't know how to manage it or anything like that. Looking back, is that what it was, or do you think you were a guy that just kind of had a lot of accumulated wear and tear from, previous exposures to throwing? What was it for you?
No, my coaches were always. I had great coaches. My dad was, someone involved in like making sure I wasn't being overused.
Yeah.
I didn't throw a curveball until I was probably 16, and then, you know, tore it when I was like 17. So I really think it was just like what you said. My body wasn't really prepared for that level of torque and velo yet, and I didn't know anything about my body. I was going in the weight room doing curls, and I didn't know what to do. I just thought the harder you worked, the better you got, and I wasn't necessarily doing the right stuff in the weight room.
Yeah. When you went through that big growth spurt, because we know you're a guy who's like, you're stiffer. That's just the nature of it.
Hmm.
You're always guys that are super hypermobile that make it to the big leagues and guys that have more range of motion limitations. And you work really hard at your mobility to stay on top of it. Was that something that changed dramatically when you went through that growth spurt? Did you go from kind of be like the, loosey goosey to going and becoming like kind of like the newborn horse, so to speak?
I don't know. I wasn't aware enough of my body at that point to really tell you, but I'm I'm thinking that, yeah. I remember I just started having more like growing pains, essentially like my knee would bother me, my hip would bother me as I was hitting that growth spurt, and then the elbow came, and it was just, I think, probably tightened up a little bit. You would probably know better than me based off of watching athletes hit those huge growth spurts, but I did start having a lot more like aches and pains after that growth spurt.
Mhm. Okay, so you went to Oklahoma for a year and then headed on to a junior college, Navarro College, and won a national championship there, and then went to Vanderbilt. So like three schools in 3 years. Talk about like what were the developmental milestones that you hit to eventually become a high round draft pick, and also like what was the rationale for kind of some of the changes? Where were you struggling to get development in places you needed it?
Yeah, so I, like I said, didn't pitch senior year because I had it in summer before my senior year. I had the surgery, so now I'm going into Oklahoma and really need to, get some innings under my belt, get just continue developing, and I didn't get that there just because it's competitive, and I
Mhm.
was coming off a year of not pitching. I wasn't sharp, and we were a good team. That team made it to the College World Series that year. So
Mhm.
I didn't make the roster. I threw maybe 10 innings that year, and it wasn't awful, but it wasn't my good stuff, and didn't make the roster. And kind of sat down with my agent at the time, or talked to my agent at the time, and my dad, and just people around me, and we just figured that I needed to go somewhere where I could just get opportunity after
Mhm.
opportunity regardless of how I was throwing. And at that point, I had some buddies at Navarro Junior College, reached out to them, and I was actually set up to go to the Cape in the summer after my freshman year. So that was a big summer for me. Um, Went there, threw great, put me on the map with Vanderbilt. They saw me out there, and decided to make the transfer to Navarro, and then sign with Vandy in the fall before I ever, before the spring at Navarro. And that year at Navarro was a good year for our team, but I had a rough year on the mound, honestly. And I was already signed with Vandy, and everything was inked there, so they couldn't, change their mind. And I ended up going from Navarro to Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt's really where, it was a turning point in my career. That's where everything, for the first time since probably before that Tommy John, when I had that big jump, Vanderbilt was the year where I just put everything together. Not everything, but saw some huge growth both mentally and physically, and then was able to sign in the fourth round out of there.
Do you think it was when you look at like the change that happened? Obviously, you had, I think that was Derek Johnson's last year or last full year at Vandy. What were the biggest, kind of bits of, was it wisdom that they imparted to you? Was it just the overall structure? Was it, pitches that they took away from you? Like, what was it that helped you take such a big jump in that year?
I think it was just from the beginning, it was structure in my throwing program. And everyone, a big word now is intent in the way you throw. And, we threw the ball hard, and we threw the ball a lot, and we threw it far. It was a lot of throwing, and I had never had that level of throwing. And at first my arm was hanging every day, but then we got to the point where it was more like the intent behind our throwing was you're getting something out of every single ball that you throw, no matter what. And that was something, I used to go out and play catch and just kind of get through it, get the arm moving. And I was talking, I wasn't really focused on throwing.
Mm-hmm.
And at Vandy, I learned that every single ball I throw, you can get something out of. And the steps, the strides I made in that year were huge because of that. And then, all of that comes from Derek Johnson. Like you said, Tyler Beatty was singing his praises. That's because he was unbelievable. He was pivotal in my career. So, he worked with us. He'd sit us down in the classroom, and we'd have talks on the mental game. And then he was just really structured with our throwing program, and it was somewhat individualized, and it meshed well with me.
That's awesome. So talk to me a little bit about like the pitch mix coming out of college. I know we've seen a bunch of different versions of Druverhagen, from an approach, started versus relieving. Maybe speak to like what it was then when you left Vandy, went to the Tigers, and then how has it evolved over the course of time to where it is now?
Yeah, so it's always been somewhat similar, but it was just two seam, no four seams coming out of college, and then a big curveball and an occasional changeup. And I tried throwing a four seam, but it would just cut, and I would yank it, and I was just naturally would sink the ball. So, I was throwing my two seam as hard as I could and ripping off a curveball and praying that it was in the zone every now and then. And maybe once every three outings, throw a changeup or something. And that was kind of what I got to the big leagues with, was that kind of repertoire. But later down the road, I guess it was probably more like 16, 17, added a slider, started throwing more four seams to elevate and set up the curveball, and mixing in a few more changeups. But later down the road is really my time in Japan was where I started throwing the changeup more. And but yeah, I got to the big leagues basically two seam curveball changeup, and that was what I left Vanderbilt with.
Do you think, as time has gone on, like, do you think it was just reps? I mean, were there big adjustments? Was it knowing your delivery better? I mean, we're going to talk about it, but you missed some time with injuries and, had some, some inconsistent points of development. Like, was it just a matter of needing more reps to throw, what you were already doing? Or did you do a lot of things differently with respect to the changeup and, learning the four seam and pro ball versus college? What was the change?
Getting a call, sorry, but I think the reps. I've always been a guy that, as the season's gone on, my stuff has just come together. If you look at my numbers in April versus July and August, I mean, it's probably pretty crazy difference. I've never sat down and looked at it, but I just get more comfortable the more the ball's in my hand. And I think as I've gone on, I've thrown a little bit more in the off season every year, or started a little bit earlier. Whereas first few years in pro ball, it was, 2 solid months probably of no throwing. And now I'm maybe 2 weeks of no throwing and then picking up a ball. But I'm not back on the mound, but I'm at least have a ball in my hand. And I think it just goes back to that, like, every time I throw a ball, I'm working on something. Yeah. Whether it's sometimes it might not be mechanical. It might not be get my hip here, my arm here. It might just be seeing a target and hitting that target. But there's something productive happening with every time I throw the ball. So I think, you stick around long enough, we put as much time as we do into this game, you're just going to see a progression. And the injuries were the huge setback on that, because you lose so much time developing. But as far as just how I gained better feel of the change up in the four seam, it was just repetition.
Yeah. So we first met in the off season of 14. It was after your MLB debut, and we got connected by a couple of your Vanderbilt teammates with Beatty and some of those guys. And you were dealing with a stress fracture in your back. And I think we're 2022 now. 8 years later, this is a much more defined diagnosis, treatment plans. There's still the debate about whether you back brace it or not. You would kind of pitch through it for an extended period of time. Talk to me about, like, maybe the timeline on that stress fracture. When did it start? How did it impact your ability, to do what you needed to do on the mound?
Yeah, I think I honestly first ever felt back pain at Vandy, and then signed in the summer and pitched down the stretch. They moved me to high A straight from the draft, and we won the championship Florida State League. And I was hurting pretty bad. That was in 2012. And that was like last start of the year. I wasn't feeling too good, but went into the off season, did what I thought was best at the time for it. 13 came back and actually had a really good year, and just kind of managed it with a bunch of dead bugs basically. And then 14, I got to the big leagues, and that whole first half I was battling that thing. And so really I pitched with it for probably a couple years. And then 14, it just got so bad. And I told my dad, I remember I went home for All-Star break, 14 AAA All-Star break, and I was like, Dad, I'm about to hit the DL. This back is killing me. And then the next day I get a call, hey, you're pitching in the big leagues on whatever day it was.
It was a doubleheader, right? You were like,
yeah, it was a doubleheader against Cleveland. And I was like, all right, I'm not going to tell him I can't do that. So I went and threw 5 innings. And I remember the 5th inning was just killing me. And I didn't pitch again the rest of that year. They sent me down after the game. That was the plan, as the 26th man for the doubleheader. And then I didn't pitch again the rest of that year. I think I came and saw you in that offseason, right? 14.
It was one of, I actually distinctly remember it was downpouring on your first day, and we were in that small location while we were waiting for our building to open up. So
yeah, I remember that.
It was a big Vanderbilt day. Ryan Flaherty was there. I remember distinctly.
Yeah, I remember that day well too. And I came and saw you in 14, and then it was still a thing when I showed up to spring. I think I came and saw you for probably 2 days and did the program remote, and I didn't know anything about what I was doing really. So I wasn't getting the most out of it. And then I missed the first half of 15 too. And then finally got back healthy in 15 and finished strong down the stretch. But I had to stay on top of stuff and really learn like your programming and how to basically engage my core. I had no concept of how to do that.
Yeah, I think these things they take time. You got to obviously let them settle down, and you got to figure out how all the pieces fit together. One of the things that I learned from kind of going through this with you is, like, historically we've seen this as like you see like the 16-year-old kid that goes for, a back brace for 12 to 16 weeks. They very rarely do that with like a high level athlete. It's more like, hey, let's get this guy back as quickly as you can. And, you have rehabilitation and you have reconditioning. You've got to build it up so you can go out and throw 100 pitches if you want to. And I think you were a guy that I learned a lot just from talking to you about this. And, the thing that I always remember over those first couple of years, and I use you as an example a lot, was that, what we know about like these stress fractures, it's not like just like where if you break your arm, 10 years later, if we do an x-ray of that arm, you kind of don't even know it was ever broken. With like some of these stress fractures in the back, like the healing's not like a perfect bone on bone. And some of these guys just, they'll have like a random day of stiffness, every 1 to 2 months, one day where it doesn't feel awesome. I feel like that was you for an extended period of time. Every time we felt like we were out of the woods, you just kind of have a day where you're like, all right, what's going on with this? But over the years, like, when you came in this off season for the first time, I can't remember the last time we talked about back pain with you. Like, it's not a thing anymore 8 years later. Do you remember that kind of like slowly abating?
Yeah, I do. I feel like, 15 came back, and then I feel like 16, by the time I was at spring training, 16, it was like becoming a thing of the past, because I just felt like I had so much control over my core. It was almost like, I like to think of it as like I built like a protective cage around that spondy, around that stress fracture. And so it was just like, anytime I would feel it, if we were running around, let's say we're shagging BP in spring, we've been on our feet all day, and I do feel it a little bit. If I just turn my core on, or like literally, kind of engage that, it would go away instantly. So I'd spend the day, if it was bothering me, like jogging around like that kind of, and you just gain a little more strength, a little more awareness of that, and it became a thing of the past.
Yeah, I think we always try to find things that unify injuries, right? So, and we'll talk about thoracic outlet in a second, but like at the end of the day, it's kind of like this extensor bias, right? We get really like toned up through our lats, we get a lot of extension through our low back. It interferes with our ability to get our shoulder back into good layback, and sometimes our elbow pays the price with the Tommy John, or you wind up with a stress fracture in your back. But the one that's tricky is, just as the spine got healthy, the other stuff kind of really started building a little bit. So maybe sticking with this injury theme, like you were a slow build to thoracic outlet over the course of 2016. Talk to me about this. Is obviously it's something I've really dedicated a lot of my work to over the last probably 5 or 6 years. It was a hard diagnosis then. It's a hard diagnosis now, but it was much less accepted. In 2016, I remember us having conversations that there were some organizations that didn't believe in it. Now we have Dr. Thompson, Dr. Pearl, we have, specialists in a lot of the major cities that are treating this. Talk to me about like when you first started noticing that something was going on, what your symptoms were, and how it kind of built to the point where you actually wound up having a surgery for it.
Yeah, I think it was 2016. That's when I first felt it, and I think I was at that point, I was the strongest I'd ever been. I had put on some weight, and me and Christian Wonders had worked together all off season, and I was in great shape. Ball was coming out, probably throwing the hardest that I've ever thrown. But I started off the year, let's see, I broke camp with the team, first time doing that. And I started off the year throwing like, I don't know, 7 out of 10 days or something, as a 25-year-old who's never really been out of the pen,
Opening day was like an extra inning game where I feel like you got hot a few times and then came in and closed it, right? I think it was.
Yeah, so there was a doubleheader game in Cleveland where I got hot twice in the first one, twice in the second, and then threw 2 in a third. And that's the one I look at and I'm like, man, that was probably where that was the straw that broke the camel's back. But I started feeling a lot of pain, like right where my incision is, right above the collarbone. It just felt like someone was like holding down right there, like pushing or something, or getting like jabbed right there. And it was constant. And, anytime I would get, or I guess, I'm not sure what was actually happening, but everything would get tightened in there to where I felt like something was pressing down. That's where it started. And then the tightness would go up into my neck along like SCM, I guess, Scalene's area. And then I started, I want to say like after that, maybe 2 weeks after I started feeling that, it started going down into my hand where as I would release a pitch, it was like a buzz into my hand. And I'd feel it like kind of after release, and it freaked me out for sure. And then that's when they really started taking it seriously, when I started getting the symptoms in my hand. And that's at that point I was shut down, and then I was coming to see Shane at your place to get work done. And I remember Shane just, every time after I would throw, he's like, dude, this is just not getting better. It's just tightening right back up.
Yeah, it's hard to make muscles that are big and maybe shouldn't be big go away. I mean, that's why they treat these with Botox. And, we know about nerves, and yours was obviously nerve and not vascular blood clots and stuff, but nerves don't like to be compressed and they don't like to be stretched. So when you're a guy who obviously lays down tissue really, really well. We know you kind of adaptively do that, both in terms of muscle mass and in terms of just kind of density. And then you get a high volume of exposures. It just makes it hard for those nerves to glide the way they need to. And then we're asking them to do it with the single fastest motion in all sports. So I think, it's so often we see like when someone brings up this concept of thoracic outlet, like, there's 800 chiropractors on the internet that's like, I could fix him. I'm like, yeah, but can you fix him while he's making 80 appearances in a 162 game season plus, 40 false alarms where he's got to get up and get hot? It's just a very different world.
Yeah, I've had that. I've had multiple conversations with chiropractors about that. They're like, no, please tell me you didn't do that. I could have fixed that. And I'm like, maybe for the general population, but not for a pitcher.
It's not meant to be disparaging in any way to like an entire subset. It could have been a physical therapist or an ATC or anybody. I think the thing that we forget is there actually is research that supports that we have reduced blood flow to the arms of pitchers. Like there are nerves and vascular structures they're effectively compressed, and some people compress more than others due to their individual like anthropometric characteristics, how much tissue density they lay down, whatever their workload is. Everyone kind of probably has thoracic outlet to some degree. It's just a matter of how significant does it get. And I distinctly remember, I think we talked about this when Josh Beckett had it really late in his career. He was with the Dodgers. He would talk about like there was no problem at rest. And he's like, I'd throw my pregame bullpen and my hand was numb by the end of the bullpen. It speaks to kind of like the transient swelling that takes place with activity, particularly overhead activity like, baseball, tennis, anything like that. And so the general population just doesn't deal with that. They can modify their lifestyle to avoid it. So now let's talk about the surgery, like, who did it and what the surgery actually encompassed, because yours wasn't just TOS, you had the pec minor release too.
Yeah. So I'd had what I thought was bicep tendonitis on and off. I had it at Navarro Junior College and then at Vandy some. And so I went and saw Dr. Thompson and Dr. Pearl. I saw both of them in office, and Thompson was the one who I don't know if Pearl's doing it now, but Thompson was the one who liked to do the pec minor release, and he convinced me that was, and talking to you too, that was probably a really good move for me since I'd had some of that front of the shoulder pain in the past. And so I'm really happy I did that because I haven't had, knock on wood, any issues with the front of the shoulder since that. And but yeah, Thompson he removed the top rib and then one of the scalenes, I'm not sure which one, and then did the pec minor release. And I spent that offseason in Dallas at a TMI Meister's facility with Regan Wong, and he did a great job with me. And I came back feeling like solid, but not like myself, didn't have the action on my pitches. And I had surgery in August, and I was back in spring training, like kind of full go.
Yeah.
In February, and I just felt a little stiff. Didn't have the sink on my two seam. I didn't have the sharp break on my off speed, and I went out and they just let me start in AAA, and I got hit around, but I was working through it and got back to the big leagues in like July, I think, and finished the year up. But like I said, wasn't myself probably until 18. So
yeah, you got to rewire the system.
Yeah.
Like have been blocked for a long time, and you got to regroup the pattern and then build up a lot of capacity and then work on feel. It takes time.
Yeah. The feel, yeah, like I felt like I was in a really strong place. Like physically, I didn't feel like I was putting myself at risk. I'd have a little bit of symptoms early on in the hand. Maybe it was scar tissue. I don't know. But, I didn't get the feel back until probably like a year and a half out.
That's been my experience, is that you're usually looking at about a year and a half for these guys to feel normal. Probably even more so the nerve guys as opposed to like the vascular concerns. A lot of those vascular guys seem to come back even a little bit faster in my experience. They tend to have more setbacks, obviously, but when you have these guys that have dealt with numbness, tingling. I mean, you were a guy like you didn't know where the ball was, where it was going,
No,
and by the end
I
of
had
it,
trouble feeling it in my hand at
yeah.
times, like almost looking down to make sure I'm still holding on to it.
Yeah, to be honest, as I was prepping for this, I went back and I looked at, I think, your last outing before surgery. It was like you could tell there was no idea where you had no idea where the
Yeah.
ball was going.
Yeah. And then you have the mental aspect of not knowing where the ball's going when you've thrown a ball your whole life. So it can mess with you a little bit. And I was happy to have some closure on that and like, all right, that's why it's happening. We're good.
Absolutely. So, big picture, you've experienced a Tommy John, you've had a stress fracture in your spine, you've had thoracic outlet surgery. We obviously talked about like, hey, let's find the movement patterns, things like that unify, multiple things and try to work backwards on them. And, you've had a really, kind of healthy run of it, knock on wood, since 2016. It's allowed you to obviously take some really big steps forward in terms of continuity and the ability to work on pitches. And, you're obviously in a great spot now. What are some of the big take home lessons that you would share with like injured players, their parents, their rehab specialists, anybody who's listening to this? Because none of these were really, they were all different, right? Tommy John, we know, is a year. We just talked about thoracic outlets, probably closer to 18 months to be yourself. Stress fracture is kind of like, could be a really intensive 4 months and then a gradual return. Like these are all long-term things. What advice would you share with people who are going through this kind of stuff?
I think it's the one thing I realized is, let's see, I started coming to you in 14, and I would say it took me a couple years to really grasp like all the movement stuff that we're doing, exactly how to cue myself on like postures and stuff when I'm in the weight room. But it's just all connected in some way. So like the lack of range I have in certain joints and stuff in my hip, my wherever, was affecting my full body, that in a way I didn't never really realize. And until I was able to like go in the weight room and walk out after a lift and feel like, all right, my body feels a lot better than when I walked in here and I just lifted, as opposed to setting myself back in the weight room where I was walking in the weight room and walking out with a sore back and a sore knee. I think I just learned, it was just awareness of my body and learning like the right way for my body to move. And then that's just helped me on the mound to where it's helped me become more repeatable, and it's helped me stay healthy the last few years.
We there's a guy in the fitness industry, Dan John, who has a great line that I actually steal a lot. He says, the goal is to keep the goal as the goal. And I mean, let's be honest, you pay your bills by throwing a baseball in Major League Baseball game. And so many guys get very emotionally attached to, being a rock star on Instagram with their throwing program or moving the craziest weights in the gym, no matter how horrific their technique may have been. And you were never at that extreme, but I think it does take a level of like maturity and just, experience to take a step back and be like, hey, what if I'm doing this in the moment, similar to playing catch? Is it getting me closer to like, is it supporting what I ultimately need to be doing to be the most successful in my chosen endeavor?
Right. Yeah. I think the TOS for me, because that was, like I said, probably the strongest at that point I had ever been. And to see that pop up with like, to me, what felt like I was almost too stiff and bulky in that area, I went to an almost extreme on that next year where I was like, I'm not going to lift. I don't want to do that stuff. That got in the way in the past. I'm not going to do that. And now obviously I've found that happy medium where you gotta add some strength, but do it in the right ways.
Yeah, it helps you hold the motion, right? And whether it's
Mhm.
manual therapy or positional breathing or mobility drills, like if you follow it up with the right stabilization exercise, it's gonna, the pattern's gonna hold a lot better. I want to briefly interrupt this episode just to give you a friendly reminder about today's sponsor, Anchor Training. If you haven't heard of them, you definitely need to check them out. It's been an absolute game changer to integrate these products at both of our Cressey Sports Performance facilities, where you have multiple units in each location. Really, when all is said and done, it saves space, money, and tons of headaches, while offering some portability. So, cheaper to buy, cheaper to maintain, takes up much less space in your facility, and you can move it around. You can take it on the road with you. Basically, anything you would do on a functional trainer or a cable column setup, you can do on an Anchor unit. And that's why I've become a really big fan. And I'm excited to see what these folks are doing, not just for healthy athletes and, training rotational power and things like that, but also for, conveniently offering some portability to people in the rehabilitation community to help get athletes healthy. So we're fortunate to have a discount code for you. It's Cressey at checkout to save 10% on your purchase at anchortraining.com. Again, that's Cressey, Cressey, as the coupon code at checkout at www.ancoretraining.com to get 10% off on your purchase. Again, I can't say enough great things about them. Check it out for yourself. So you obviously came back, did your thing here, and then you went to Japan for 2020 and 2021, which actually wound up being a very good play in the context of the pandemic, where baseball was happening a little bit more in 2020 than it was here, and you really figured some stuff out. I want to say it was like the most innings that you've thrown since, right around the time you were drafted, before the stress fracture in your back really kind of reared up. So what was it about the Japan experience that helped you develop? Like, I'm always fascinated about guys, we've had Josh Lindblom, Miles Michaelis on, who are both guys that went over there and learned a ton. How did the Japanese game, teach you and get you better?
Yeah, I think those 2 years were huge for me. Both just, I think the Japanese game, as far as how that helped me, just the style of hitter over there. It's a lot of. I mean, my second year, I was facing 9 lefties that were all fast, that all had pretty good plate discipline and the ability to foul off pitches and spoil it and get your pitch count up. So like that, if there's a hitter that I had a weakness, it was lefties that didn't swing out of their shoes, that were like those little tough, scrappy lefties. Those are some of the hardest guys to get out as a righty. And I spent the first year, they were just slapping my two seam to left and, giving up crooked numbers and stuff on really, really weak contact, but that was their game. It wasn't like you could just chalk it up to, oh, that's weak contact. No, that you have to be able to stop that or stop the bleeding. And so that forced me to throw the four seam more up and in, work on the changeup, something that looked like the two seam, but it wasn't. And just overall command of all my pitches, just because they had pretty good plate discipline. So I was able to get everything in the zone. And for the first time in a long time, I was given the ball on a regular basis, where you're the starter, you're going to throw over there. It's once a week, no matter what, you're throwing once a week. And you just gain so much. There's so much development when you're able to do that with your midweek bulk sides, and then starting and going 110 pitches once a week. It was pretty great from that standpoint. And the other thing was I was alone over there. So it was even my second year, we didn't have much of a pitching coach, honestly. So it was just me and my interpreter, and me bouncing stuff off him. How did that look? What do you think? But really, it's just you. And I don't know. It was interesting. I didn't have someone in my ear, or someone, which I'm very coachable. I love that, but it was almost good for me at that time to just focus on my pitching and get better, and basically get as good as I wanted to be. Just try to continue working tons of repetitions, and like it was easy to like just block everything out and zone in on pitching over there.
I love that. So many people forget how hard a 5-day rotation is. Like everyone, I mean, you see college kids, they get thrown 104 now. Like it's, and granted he's thrown out of the pen, but like it's pretty easy to be ready to roll when you throw on a 7-day rotation. In college, and a lot of guys get they get punched in the mouth when they go to pro ball and it's a 5-day rotation and they don't know whether to throw their pen on day 2 or day 3. They don't know how many pitches to throw in their pen because they're worried about they're gonna overdo it. You're just like you're learning to pitch at 90% when that 5th day rolls around again.
Right.
Going to a 7-day rotation for a guy who's coming off some injuries and just needs like quality, consistent reps, it's actually like a brilliant strategy, whether you planned it out intentionally or not. You can throw 2 pens between games if you need to. You can do anything you really need to do to get your quality work in.
Yeah, I did that at times, especially early on, because it seemed like forever between starts. I was just like, and sometimes it was longer than once a week, if an off day rolled in or, just different scenarios. So it was, it honestly couldn't have been a better fit for me during that time of my career.
That's outstanding.
Yeah.
Curious, you've started and relieved in the U.S. You became a starter when you went to Japan. Now you came back, signed with the Cardinals, and right now it's long relief. But when you're a long reliever, you're always like an injury away from being in the rotation at a moment's notice. Like, is there one that you prefer? And what are the challenges that maybe each of them presents to you?
Yeah, I think overall I prefer starting for sure, but for the reasons that we just said, getting in that routine, you're just able to sharpen up pitches and just repeat, and just it's not so much all right, get thrown into battle and basically survive out there, or like there's really, when you come in out of the bullpen, it's really is you need those results, right? That's what the game's about. So whereas as a starter, you're working on your pitches in between starts and whatnot, and I just feel like I can develop a little bit better over the course of a season as a starter.
Yeah.
That being said, I love the adrenaline rush of coming in out of the pen for a 1 inning stint. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Long relief, whatever, it is what it is. It's not as fun. So I think starting and then short relief are my 2 favorite. Long relief is you're still pitching, you're still able to go in and attack guys and stuff. But the challenges, I think, keeping your body ready every day out of the bullpen. So I was, let's see, this past 2 weeks, I came in for like 2 2/3, and then 2 days later, I came in just for a 1 inning stint. And to me, those are different. Setups. One, I'm like coming in the 4th inning. The other, I'm coming in the 7th in a 1-run game. So it's interesting. You have a different mindset in those. But at the end of the day, I try not to overcomplicate it and just make it as simple as it possibly can be, which is just executing pitches, getting ahead, and getting guys out, and just doing that as long as they leave you in. So that's my easiest way to just simplify it.
It's awesome. I'm actually really fascinated to hear your answer on this because you've learned a ton about your body, and you're a super hard worker, who probably if at all would be more inclined to do too much at times, right? Because you do like to train and get after it. I'm curious, when you're relieving, there's never really like an ideal time to do stuff, right? You never know when you're going to pitch, whether a starter doesn't make it out of the first and you have to pick up quite a bit of volume, or like you said, you come in to face a righty or whatever it is, right? So I guess my question is, how do you manage your training and your throwing volume to stay ready, but at the same time not detrain? Because you're obviously a guy who's learned a lot about what your body needs, but the last thing you want to do is just not be in an ideal situation to succeed. So how do you approach like the week?
So I'm like, I'm coming off 2 years of being on a set routine. So I'm having to refine, like, this is my first time back in the pen with I don't really know when I'm going to pitch right now. And I'm the type of guy that really, I like lifting. I don't go crazy, but I feel a lot better. I feel really good if I do a light lift prior to throwing, even if I'm going to pitch that night. So I've been doing, if I do happen to pitch, I'll go heavy the day after and a little more lower focus. But I've been mixing in these lighter full body workouts like kind of every other day. And it doesn't affect me one bit on the mound. If anything, it makes me feel better.
That's
So yeah, it's more like a feel good, full body, and then go out and do my throwing. And my throwing pregame, I've been doing. I like to get a little air underneath it, but I'm not taxing the arm where I'm going like hard pull downs on the way in. I like to get air under it, nice and easy. Feel my slot. Feel what I need to feel, and then come in, flip some pitches. But I'm not like crow hopping, trying to break any records out there before the game.
absolutely. And then obviously like daily prep, like warm up on like an everyday basis, just moving around, whether it's soft tissue work or getting treatments and then going through your mobility exercises. Like that's the stuff that obviously gets you back to neutral, independent
Yeah,
of throwing.
that's the stuff that I'm doing daily, no matter what, every day. But the as far as lifting, I have to, you got to balance that a little bit more. But the soft tissue, the breathing stuff, that's just like part of my daily routine.
Right on. All right. We always do a lightning round at the end of every podcast. Who do you
All
like
right.
to watch in today's game and why?
I mean, I like to watch a lot of different guys. Honestly, right now, I love watching my fellow Vandy boy, Walker Bueller. He is just filthy. Love watching the way he pitches. Love the swagger he has on the mound. So I'll go with Walker.
There you go. Favorite teammate of all time and why?
So if I go favorite teammate, I got my buddies who I keep in touch with a lot. But just someone who I really kind of looked up to more as a young guy and I thought was a really, really good teammate. I liked the way he carried himself, was Ian Kinsler.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
Mainstay right there in those years you were there too.
Yeah.
What's next for you in your development? What do you need to do to take your outcomes to the next level?
I like the path I'm on right now. So I'm consistently growing, and what I feel like is trending upwards. So I think just a better coming in out of the pen, a better ability to just land those off speed pitches in any count, no matter what. And I think if I can do that, I'm going to continue having success.
Awesome. Last one is advice for a teenage Druverhagen. Let's say a 16-year-old Druverhagen pre Tommy John.
Oh man, spend more time warming up probably. But I don't know. I think at that point you don't know how long you're going to play, so it was kind of like live or die based on every outing. I would just tell that version of myself just maybe write your goals down, get a notebook out, write your goals down, and stick to like a process rather than riding that wave of however your last outing was. Your confidence fluctuates with that. Like that's not a recipe for success. So I would just have them stick to your process.
Nice. Well, hey man, this is awesome. You're a trooper. I know you're on your phone. You left your iPad at the field. That's an absolute gamer. Always taking the ball when asked. So really appreciate you doing this, man. For those listening, Drew's is on both Twitter and Instagram at Drew VerHagen. Always sharing good stuff, man. And we're cheering for you. You're a facility favorite on CSP. Everybody loves watching you do your thing, and we're rooting for you to have a great season. So thanks so much for doing this.
Sweet, Eric. I appreciate you guys. I wouldn't, no chance I'd be where I am without you guys. So I appreciate it.
Programs only work because you do. But thank you for saying so.
All right, man.